Revealed. The haunted presence of Mr. No-Eyes cursed our home for 30 terrifying days. Greg Parker thought he left the darkness of his factory job behind, but as he stepped through the front door that night, a chill settled over him, deep in his bones. It was like walking into a funeral home. An eerie silence suffocated the cheerful hum of home life. Shadows lengthened and twisted, teasing the edges of his vision. He shook his head, trying to dispel the nerves prickling at the back of his neck. Was someone watching him? Just the exhaustion, he thought, and yet a dread crawled up his spine. Emily, his lovely wife, perched on the edge of the couch, flipping through a magazine as if it could distract her from the mounting pressures of their suburban life. The kids, Lily and Jack, were tucked away in their rooms, blissfully unaware of their father's silent struggle. "Hey, you're home," she said, smiling, yet there was something tight in her expression. He could feel their home, the place he worked so hard for, become a cavern, swallowing laughter and light. That evening, a hesitation hung heavily over the house as Greg peered out into the backyard, scanning the darkened trees. How strange was it that those shadows seemed to stretch into something more. Just as he saw a flicker of movement, a shape darted away, vanishing into the lingering gloom. The last thing he caught was a glimpse of something he couldn't comprehend, two voids where eyes should be, piercing through the night. The next day, the weight of fear crept into Maplewood, a town usually so serene, now filled with whispered accusations and judgmental glances. "Is he acting odd?" he overheard a neighbor murmur. To Emily, Greg's rattled nerves were just fatigue, a factory worker pushing his limits. But Greg knew better. Shadows curled in the corners of their home, where dread turned into something tangible, something sinister. Curiosity gnawed at him, and Greg dove into dark local folklore. He discovered tales of Mr. No-Eyes, the shadow of despair that haunted the area decades ago, an entity linked to children who vanished without a trace. The very thought drained the color from his skin. The symbols began appearing too, etched into their walls, sinister runes that felt like warnings shouted from a nearby grave. Preoccupied with these discoveries, Greg's mind raced as the night crept in again. With each unsettling scrape and echo that reverberated through their home, he felt the relationship with Emily strain at the seams. Neighbors turned cold, detached, their once friendly faces now stony and indifferent. Panic gripped them as laughter from their children's rooms twisted into something hollow and dark. "Listen to me, Em." Greg's voice trembled as he shared his fears. But as doubt clouded their connection, their house felt ever more like a trap, a haunted sanctuary closed off from the world. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. On the 31st night, with darkness swallowing hope, the Parkers became trapped in a game governed by the malevolent grasp of Mr. No-Eyes. Jack's laughter that once filled the house turned hollow, echoing a panic that twisted Emily's heart. She could feel time slipping away as she realized something sinister was lurking, hovering, waiting for the right moment to strike. As Greg lunged forward to find answers, the lights flickered ominously, the air thick with a penetrating darkness. Then came the whisper, slithering through the suffocating tension, "You can't trust anyone." The door creaked open, revealing a sight that snatched the breath from his lungs. The empty sockets of Mr. No-Eyes, inching closer, pulling their family apart as their world crumbled into chaos. The last thought that sent a surge of terror through them was if they could survive the night together, or if this haunting would rip their family apart forever. The air was thick with fear, and Greg felt it weighing down on him like a heavy shroud. He barely had time to grasp the gravity of the situation before the darkness surged into the room. It was as if shadows had come alive, curling around the furniture and creeping towards the family huddled together. Emily's eyes widened, reflecting the dim light from the flickering bulbs as she grasped Jack and Lily, willing them to stay quiet. "Don't look at him," Greg shouted, his voice cracking in desperation. But it was too late. Jack's innocent gaze had locked onto the void that was Mr. No-Eyes. With every second, The air grew colder, the atmosphere thickening to the point where breathing became a chore. Greg stepped forward instinctively, feeling the pull of the dark figure, its presence hungry and demanding. Emily clutched Jack and Lily tighter, her voice a mere whisper. "What do we do?" Shadows danced in the corners of her vision as they pressed in closer. She could feel dread like an ice-cold hand wrapped around her throat. "Stay back," Greg yelled again, but the words felt powerless. With each passing moment, he felt his strength drain away, the urge to flee battling against the primal instinct to protect his family. The figure loomed larger, an unsettling mixture of lost hopes and despair. Its eyeless sockets seemed to absorb all light, the void drawing them in. A sudden, sharp sound clawed through the silence, a child's cry from the upstairs. "Lily!" The terror in Greg's heart exploded. "Emily, take the kids and hide. I'll get Lily." "Greg, no," she pleaded, but he could see the fight leaving her, drowned in an ocean of darkness. He ran for the stairwell, heart pounding, the sound of his own breath loud and frantic in his ears. Each step felt submerged in molasses, the air thickening with whispering voices, taunting him as he ascended. He reached the landing and pushed open Lily's door. "Lily, are you there?" The room was empty, the bed unmade. A strange chill washed over him, an unnatural silence. Panic gripped his chest, squeezing tighter with every passing second. Just then, the door clicked shut behind him. Greg swung around, but it was too late. Mr. No Eyes filled the frame. The moonlight spilled over his form, revealing the shape of a body, but void of any warmth. Greg stumbled back, his pulse racing. "What do you want?" he gasped, desperation rising. The figure shimmered, and he swore he could hear a mournful cry embedded in the whispering shadows. "They will come for what is theirs," the voice hissed, echoing like a memory lost in time. The walls creaked, the very house groaning under the weight of ancient secrets and fears. Greg felt a surge of desperation. If he couldn't protect his family from the darkness, from whatever this was, then it would consume them all. He lunged toward the door, but the shadows swirled and enveloped him, dragging him into the inky blackness. As he fought against the grip of despair, images flashed before his mind. Children playing in the grass, laughter, warmth. Would he lose all of these moments? Would Mr. No Eyes take them too? The room spun, twisting reality, as he strained against the presence holding him captive. Just then, a voice cut through the chaos, soft but clear. "Help us." It came from downstairs. Emily's voice, but fractured. The weight of sorrow and fear rode on each syllable, breaking through the darkness like a splinter of hope. Could they still find their way back to each other? In that moment of clarity, Greg felt the darkness stir, as if Mr. No Eyes sensed his resolve. "Family will be your undoing," it hissed, even as Greg surged from the shadows, racing back toward the staircase. The shrill sounds of panic echoed behind him, shadows in pursuit. Ready to reclaim him in despair, he reached for the children and Emily, heart racing. But could he save them? Could they all escape the sinister grip of Mr. No Eyes? Or would they stumble together into eternal darkness? Greg dashed down the hallway, adrenaline surging through him. Each step was a battle against the chilling shadow that threatened to engulf him whole. He could hear Emily's cries growing louder, echoing through the oppressive silence of the house. "Stay with me. I'm coming," he shouted, his voice trembling. But uncertainty gnawed at him. He hadn't heard Lily's laughter in too long. Had that cry been a warning? He burst into the living room, the dim light barely pushing back the overwhelming darkness. Shadows slithered along the walls, dark tendrils reaching toward him, eager to deliver him to the same fate that awaited others. He scanned the room, a frantic pulse hammering in his chest. Where were they? "Emily, where are you?" His heart sank as a scream pierced the suffocating air. It was different this time, thinner, cutting through his resolve like glass. "Greg." Emily's voice rang out, and his blood ran cold. It wasn't he far. "Help us." The shrill desperation clawed at him. He raced to the staircase, and as he bounded up, there it was again, the weight of dread pressed against his back, an icy hand urging him to turn. "Don't look back," he whispered to himself, pushing onward. The landing felt wrong. A grotesque stillness wrapped around him like a noose. He reached the second floor, and his eyes fell on a door, slightly ajar, light spilling from within. Was it Lily's room? Or an illusion created by the darkness? He fought against the urge to stall, thrusting the door open. Inside, the room was bathed in a strange glow. But there was no warmth, only the cold echoes of laughter that twisted his stomach. All his fears blossomed. Greg felt an unease linger, knowing Mr. No Eyes could be watching, waiting for him to make a mistake. "Lily?" he called, a whisper choked by terror. A movement caught his eye. He stepped deeper inside, heart hammering, the light flickering. Then he saw them. Emily crouched low, Jack beside her, eyes wide and glimmering with unshed tears. They were not alone. Out of the shadows, the figure stood watching, the void of its face almost unbearable to behold. "Get back!" Greg shouted, but it was too late. The shadows erupted. Screams ricocheted off the walls, and the air thickened with the smell of something rotten. His family was lost in the chaos, flailing against the unseen grasp of despair. No. He lunged toward Emily and the kids, but the darkness pulsed around him, forming a barrier he could not breach. The vortex tightened, and time warped, wrapping him in a suffocating embrace. "Greg!" Emily shrieked, reaching for him, fingers brushing against the encroaching night. "Help us!" Tendrils of shadow lashed out, wrapping around his limbs. Greg fought against them, but they coiled tighter, siphoning his strength. The cries faded into whispers, desperate and pleading, blending with the cacophony of chaos brewing inside him. "Family is weakness," Mr. No Eyes' choir echoed, swallowing their voices. "Embrace the void." A surge of fury washed over Greg. No. He refused to let despair consume him or his family. With a primal scream, he surged against the darkness, tapping into every ounce of love and strength he had. Suddenly, clarity came like a flash of lightning. He needed to fight back, to shatter the cycle binding them. "Emily, look at me," he shouted, pouring every shred of determination into his words. "We'll break this. Together." Just then, a new sound pierced the darkness, a faint giggle, ringing through the room with a chilling innocence. "Help, Lily." And in that moment, shadows flickered, drawing back just enough for the light to breathe again. Greg surged forward, catching hold of Emily and the kids, gripping them tightly as the night shattered around them. "Hold on," he cried, an unyielding strength driving him forward. Could they escape, or would Mr. No Eye seal their fate forever? The walls trembled. The voice echoed furious, "You can't run from what is yours." With hearts racing, the family raced for the stairs, but just beyond the threshold, darkness lay in wait, its hunger unfathomable. The door loomed, a threshold to their salvation. Or perhaps their worst nightmare. Would they burst through into safety, or would the void claim them? In that moment, everything hinged on one last desperate leap. They barreled through the door, bursting into the narrow corridor. The house trembled, the walls trembling in rhythm with their hurried breaths. Shadows flickered like hungry flames, devouring any semblance of safety. Greg could still feel the remnants of that icy grip wrapping around his limbs, but he pressed on, fueled by desperation. "Emily, keep moving," he urged, glancing back to make sure she and the children were close. Jack and Lily were clutching onto Emily's skirts, their small feet barely keeping pace. Darkness throbbed behind them, a sinister pulse that seemed to swell with every step they took. Sweat trickled down Greg's spine, and he could feel the shadow slithering right behind, ready to claw back at his family. Up the stairs they went, the wood creaking beneath their weight, almost sounding like a chorus of warning. Each echo dripped with a reminder of how fragile their escape was. And then he heard it, a low-pitch hum, a voice from the void. "Come back, we have all the time in the world." A chill crept into Greg's bones. He shot a glance at Emily, eyes wide with terror. "Don't listen." The moment he turned back, it struck him a sudden force propelled him into the wall. Pain erupted in his shoulder. He staggered, choking on the darkness that swirled around him. Greg pushed against it with everything he had, screaming for his family. "Get to the attic," he shouted, fighting through the haze. He could see the trapdoor above, the only window of hope, yet the shadows writhed, twitching with unnatural energy, clawing at his ankles, threatening to drag him down. "Greg, help!" Emily's voice broke through, layered with panic. Greg's heart felt like it would leap from his chest. It echoed in his ears like a funeral dirge. "I'm coming," he roared, forcing himself free from the shadows clawing at him. With a lunge, he reached for the trapdoor, the rough wooden edges biting into his fingers as he heaved it open. Light spilled out, cutting through the darkness like a knife. "Go," he urged, shoving Lily and Jack ahead. The moment they crossed into the attic, the shadows recoiled as if burned by the light. But Greg couldn't find Emily. "Emily, come on," he shouted desperately, feeling the tightness in his chest rise like a flood. And then he saw her, stumbling backward on the stairs, a figure emerging from the dark behind her. Mr. No Eyes. The chill that washed over Greg was unlike anything before. It was fear, a tangible thing that caught in his throat. The figure towered, enveloped in darkness, those hollow pits where eyes should be seeming to stare right through him. "Family will fall," it whispered, its voice slick like oil. Greg felt the floor shift beneath him. The shadows seemed alive, wrapping tighter around him, squeezing the light out of the attic. "Emily, don't!" Greg screamed, reaching toward her. But just as she turned to flee, a massive hand surged from the shadows, gripping her wrist in a vice-like grasp. Greg's heart splintered at the sight. "No!" He burst forward, but the darkness surged to meet him, powerful tendrils wrapping around his legs, pulling him into its grip. "Let her go!" he yelled, rage boiling over as he thrashed wildly, but the darkness only deepened, drowning out his voice. "Give in, Greg," Mr. No Eyes taunted, its distorted voice wrapping around their family. "You are outnumbered." The shadows seemed to close in tighter, almost delighting in their chaos. Despair slithered like a snake into Greg's heart. He couldn't lose them. They had come too far. Frantically, he searched for something, anything that would break this nightmare. It was then he caught sight of a shard of glass, glimmering in the flickering light. With a surge of strength, he lunged for it. One chance, one desperate gamble could save them. But as the darkness quaked around him, he realized not just their lives were at stake. The heart of the battle hung on a whisper of bravery against the overwhelming fear. "Together," he called, eyeing his family, almost within reach. But would he be able to slice through the shadows before they swallowed them whole? "Family is weakness," the voice hissed again, "and you will lose them all." Forcing back the creeping dread, Greg prepared for one last fight. Could courage illuminate the darkness, or would despair finally victory? The glass shard felt jagged and sharp in Greg's hand, a cold promise of salvation. He clutched it tightly, pressing it against the darkness as if trying to carve a path through the malevolence. The shadows shivered, a sickly ripple of uncertainty that spread through the thick air. "Stay together," he shouted again, his voice trembling as it pierced through the chaos. Emily's terrified gaze found his, bright with fear, yet flickering with a spark of defiance. "I want to let go," she cried, struggling against the grip that held her. But the force was relentless, thrumming with a cruel energy that threatened to pull her deeper into the abyss. Greg hurled himself at them, heart pounding, the glass now a beacon in his grasp. "Emily," he urged, desperation rising in his throat. The darkness wriggled, tendrils wrapping tightly around his arms, but he fought against it, swinging his improvised weapon wildly. Shards of light burst from the glass, illuminating a sliver of the attic, just enough to glimpse the horror that loomed at Mr. No Eyes took a step forward, the lack of features somehow accentuating its terrifying presence. "You think you can fight what is already inside?" it taunted, that oily voice sliding into Greg's ears like a thick fog. "Not without a fight," Greg roared, lunging toward the figure, the shard crackling against the air. But the shadows lashed out, wrapping around him like a blanket of despair, squeezing out hope and lighting a fire of turmoil deep in his stomach. "Greg," he heard Jack's quivering voice, a fragile sound that tore at his heart. The little boy was wide-eyed, teetering on the brink of collapse with fear. "Help, Mom." With renewed strength, Greg pulled against the wretched force ensnaring him. "I'm here. I'm coming," he barked, forcing himself forward as adrenaline surged. The glass glinted like a comet's tail, a fleeting hope, as he stretched it toward Emily and the monstrous shadow clutching her. "Together," he shouted again, willing them to rally, to break the fear that threatened to devour them all. But shadows are treacherous allies. With a howl that sounded like shattering glass, they swarmed Greg, dragging him downward into an all-consuming void where sound and light died. Just when his world turned black, he saw a faint glow in the distance, a thread of light like a lifeline. No, he screamed against the pull, pushing toward it with every ounce of will. Family is strength. A roar erupted from the darkness that enveloped them, ripping through Greg's bones with an icy chill. Family will always fail. Mr. No-Eyes howled, its voice punctuated by shrieks that echoed off the walls. Only despair remains. You are weak. Greg's pulse quickened as he grasped the shard tighter, feeling the heat of Emily's panic still lingering in the air. Moments stretched like taffy, each one heavier than the last. In a last desperate effort, he thrust the glass toward the encroaching dark, praying it held some kind of power, some shred of light strong enough to cut through the torment. Together, he bellowed again, hoping to ignite the fire in Emily, in Jack and Lily's hearts. The room shook, a thunderclap of disapproval resounding from the depths. The shadows retreated, for a moment surprised by the sheer force of their determination. But Greg knew they wouldn't hold back for long. Fight, he urged, for each other. But as the thick tendrils flickered, Greg realized he might not have the strength to stand against them for much longer. His heart raced, spinning with doubt and fear. Suddenly, an ear-splitting crack shattered the darkness, and something shifted in the layers of shadow that obfuscated their escape. Greg! Emily screamed, her voice a lifeline in the chaos, but the glimmer began to fade. In that instant, a new presence unraveled from the depths, more powerful and terrifying than before. No longer was it just Mr. No-Eyes. What have you done? Came another voice, one that resonated deeply in Greg's marrow, one that commanded his attention and chilled his soul to the bone. And then he understood. They were not only fighting Mr. No-Eyes. They were battling something much older, ancient and hungry, and it was awakening. With his heart pounding and the very essence of despair clawing at his back, Greg had only one thought left: to unearth the truth before it consumed them all. Would this truth be their salvation, or would it finally shatter their family forever? The darkness swirled tighter, each heartbeat resonating like a drum calling for shelter from a storm. Greg felt his breath become shallow, every gasping inhale threatening to be snatched away by the shadows wrapped around him. Let her go? He growled, fury igniting within him, but desperation dimmed that flame. The second voice slithered through the thick fog, heavy and soaked in darkness. The atmosphere shifted, sharpened, as if evil was packing itself tighter around their little band of courage. Her spirit is yours, forever, it hissed, the words dripping like venom. Greg's mind raced. The truth. What truth? What darkness had they unleashed? Get out! Emily shrieked, and the raw edge in her voice made Greg's blood run cold. He forced his eyes to focus, searching for a flicker of hope in the suffocating night surrounding them. Jack's small figure danced between panic and courage, instinctively reaching for his mother. Stay close, Greg managed to shout, breaking the grip of fear, reminding them of their strength. The glass shard still pulsed in his hand, now warm to the touch, as though it could feel the pulse of the family holding its breath in that dark void. In that heartbeat, the shadows recoiled. The darkness seemed to tremble, the air vibrating with a palpable, raw energy. You cannot hold what is already broken, Mr. No-Eyes rasped, its eyes a void of despair fixating on Greg. It was a primal hunger that sparked fear deep within him. The attic, a forgotten realm of dust and shadows, felt less a sanctuary and more a cradle for evil. The walls closed in, pressing closer with every breath. Greg's grip tightened, squeezing the shard as if it could slice through the very fabric of the dark. Push against it. He roared again, desperation fueling him. Emily, Jack, fight! The light from the glass flared, illuminating the silhouettes of their terrified faces, shadows dancing wildly in response. In that light, he saw something shift. A glimmer of recognition. A moment of power surged through them like electric current. It raced down Greg's spine, a memory of laughter, warmth, home. The unseen presence creaked closer, hissing words etched with frustration. Family is your weakness. Love does not save you. It binds you to despair. Fear slithered beneath Greg's skin, yet he fought against it. We choose love, he shouted. Against you we stand. With that, the shard erupted into a blinding light, chasing back the tendrils that sought to grasp them. Shadows morphed and twisted, the walls crying out in an echo of rage and confusion. As the brilliance grew, Greg caught a glimpse of Emily stepping forward, hand gripping Jack's, a determined glint in her eyes. "Mommy," Jack squeaked, but the word was like kindling to a roaring fire. Emily squared her shoulders, courage igniting her spirit. Together, lighter than air, they pressed forward, unwittingly reflecting Greg's determination that a thunderous roar shook the attic, vibrating bones and filling hearts with dread. "You dare to defy what binds you?" The ancient whisper seeped through cracks in the shadows like water through stone. "You're wrong," Greg yelled back, rallying. "We break chains forged from fear." The shadows writhed, screamed, and began to pull back, like a tide receding from the shore. The light pulsed stronger as if validating their resolve, illuminating truths they still did not fully comprehend. But doubt lingered. Greg felt the air thicken with the weight of it, a miasma of dread. The sensation of being watched grew, eyes haunting their very being. Clarity flickered, promises mingled with the noise. That voice, he murmured to himself, racing back to the moment when the second presence first emerged. As the shadows cracked and splintered outward, Greg's mind began to piece it together. How deep and dark did this terror run? What would they have to confront before it truly unraveled? Tiny shivers of panic danced down his arms as the truth beckoned from the shadows, whispering promises of unraveling. They hadn't yet gazed into the heart of darkness. "Family is strength," Greg dared to whisper as the darkness faded, but somewhere deep, a new shadow brewed. The relentless pounding of their hearts quivered, uneasy. What awaited them still loomed, a storm gathering force just beyond the light. Would they be ready to face the deeper horror before the final moments swallowed them whole? The darkness hissed one last time before retreating. But it wasn't gone, it lingered, like a storm cloud hanging thick above their heads. Greg looked around, desperate for assurance, for a fleeting sign that hope might still be in reach for them. "Is it over?" Jack's quivering voice cut through the aftermath, anxiety seeping deep into the room. Greg clenched his fist around the shard, still warm, almost pulsating with a life of its own. I don't know," Greg admitted, the uncertainty gnawing at him like a festering wound. Emily stepped closer, her expression a mix of concern and unwavering strength. She reached out, brushing the back of her hand against Jack's cheek, grounding both of them in shared fear. In that moment of stillness, Greg felt a tug inside him, an unsettling connection to the shadows. What lay beyond the fragile bubble of light they'd created? A gnawing dread flickered in his heart when he realized the dark might not fully retreat. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed from below. The floorboards creaked and groaned, and then the sound of shuffling footsteps reverberated through the attic walls. Greg's heart raced. His grip on the shard intensified. "Stay quiet," he whispered, eyeing Emily. She nodded, eyes wide with fear, both knowing they must stay silent if they were to survive whatever had just awoken beneath their feet. They listened, breath shallow and hearts pounding like drums in a death march. The sounds grew louder, a scraping noise, as if something was clawing to free itself from a tomb. Greg's mind raced back to the stories he'd heard as a child, tales of things that lurked under the floorboards, waiting for the right moment to strike. What could be down there? Was it part of the curse? Greg's imagination painted horrors too vivid to dismiss. The whole house felt alive, as if it were breathing with a malevolent will, each heartbeat echoing in the oppressive silence. "Greg," Emily's voice broke the tension, barely a whisper. "What if it comes up here? Then we fight," he replied, stroking the shard like a talisman against the impending doom. He could sense the fear in his wife, the terror choking the air around them, but he refused to show weakness now. They were together, and together they would navigate this nightmare. The shuffling grew close, and then stopped. Shadows, as if beckoned by some unseen command, slipped under the doorframe, curling like smoke toward the light source. Greg's heart leapt to his throat. He glanced at the glass shard in his hand, wondering if its power would hold against whatever ancient, restless spirit opposed them. "Surround yourself with the truth," Greg muttered, recalling the words that resonated from Mr. No-Eyes. "Light will always chase away darkness." But this light felt fragile. The edges dimmed with every passing second. Was this merely a delay of the inevitable? Suddenly, the door burst open, flinging wood against the wall with a deafening crack. In the doorway stood a figure shrouded in shadow, the outline of no discernible form. It spoke again, its voice curling around the edges of Greg's mind, chilling him to the bone. "You've only begun to understand the consequences of your defiance." Jack gasped as Greg stepped forward, every protective instinct surging through him. "Stay back," he shouted, hefting the shard toward the figure. The air crackled again, and for a moment, everything seemed to still. The dark entity paused, then laughed a low, broken sound that vibrated through the very foundations of the house. "You think you fight for love? Love is a prison, and you will all be bound before the dawn." As the shadow advanced, Greg felt the pressure in the air shift, growing heavier, almost unbearable. Their world spun again on the axis of fear. Each family member held their breath, stricken with the realization that the battle they thought they had won was merely an opening act. What darkness had concealed those walls? And now, with each minute ticking away, would they be able to face the truth of their unraveling fates? As the shadow lunged forward, the fragile light flickered yet again, leaving only the question echoing in the charged air. How long could they hold against it before the final truth revealed itself? The figure advanced, its shadow stretching like a clawed hand reaching for their souls. Greg tightened his grip on the shard, the heat radiating from it oddly comforting amid the chill wrapping around them. Emily and Jack huddled closer, their eyes darting between the advancing darkness and the anxious flicker of the fading light that a wretched smile curled across the dark entity's indistinct face. "You've brought this upon yourselves," it hissed, each word laced with venom, reverberating through their bones. "It knows your fears. It knows your love." "Shut up," Greg yelled, desperation fueling his voice, but inside, doubt began to bloom like an unwanted weed. What did it know? What had they awakened? Suddenly, the darkness paused, almost as if it were momentarily amused by Greg's bravado. The air crackled with tension, an electric charge that made the hair on his arms rise. The entity's laughter echoed again, a sound laced with the echoes of despair. "That shard holds no power over me," it whispered, gliding closer. "You cling to it like a child to a toy, but the truths within this house are far older, far darker." Jack whimpered, pressing into Emily, his tiny hands balled into fists. "Mom, Dad." The panic in his voice splintered across the room, breaking the suffocating silence. "Listen to me," Greg urged, feeling the world around him start to fold inwards. "We can't lose hope. As long as we're together." But the shadow surged, a whirlwind of darkness enveloping them, swallowing Greg's words. A chill swept through the room, snuffing out the last remnants of light like a candle extinguished in a storm. The sense of vertigo crashed over Greg as tendrils of shadow reached out, trying to assault their sanity. The air was filled with ghostly whispers, voices of the past clawing their way into the present, threads of memories and nightmares interwoven until he couldn't distinguish one from the other. "Why do you fight?" The entity diagnosed, voice smooth like silk yet sharp as a blade. "You'll never escape the truth. This family will unravel, piece by piece, under the weight of your darkness. Love, it is but a frail illusion." Something snapped inside Greg at the mocking tone. He would not let this thing break them. Not when they had come so far. He started forward, brandishing the shard desperately. "Get back. You don't know us." The shadow recoiled slightly, the momentary hesitation sending a surge of hope through him. Behind him, he heard Emily murmuring something under her breath, an incantation or a silent prayer. He couldn't tell. All that mattered was acting now. He lunged, eyes squinted against the swirling blackness. The shard glimmered briefly as it passed through the air before piercing the darkness. For an instant, the entity froze, its laughter fading into a horrified gasp. The shadows writhed as the connection between them frayed, threads of darkness splintering into 1,000 tiny shards of chaotic energy. But just as it seemed victory might be within reach, an eruption of shadow burst forth from the doorway, enveloping them again. It was a deep, choking blackness that sucked the light from their eyes. Even as Greg struggled against the oppressive weight of despair, the shadows coiled around Jack, pulling him from Emily, who shrieked in horror, lunging to save him. "Jack! No!" Her voice pierced the void, desperation erupting. Greg felt a surge of terror as he tried to reach for Jack. "I want to lose you," he shouted, a sob escaping. But the shadows seemed alive, pulling at Jack's screams, feeding off fear, swirling into a vortex with swirling screams of the lost. Then, amid the chaos, Greg felt a sharp pull inside him, a connection deeper than the fear. In the brimming eclipse of terror, a new whisper mustered through the darkness. "You can choose to forge your own path." As the shadows tightened around them, could Greg discover a way to break the curse, or would they all fall victim to darkness? The question hung heavy in the air, poised to snap like a rubber band stretched too far, threatening to break. What paths lay ahead, and would they find the truth hidden in the dark? Time slowed as the shadows tightened their grip, clawing at Jack's cries, a cacophony of terror that twisted like a dagger in Greg's heart. The grip of darkness was suffocating, wrapping around him like a serpent, squeezing out his courage, his resolve. "Jack!" Emily screamed, her body writhing as she fought against the encroaching void. Greg felt the warmth of her hand slip from his as the shadows tugged them apart. The entity's laughter echoed, filling the room with a malicious glee. "Every scream, every tear, will feed me," the entity crooned, its voice dripping with twisted satisfaction. "What keeps you together will rip you apart. Watch as love disintegrates into madness." "No, we're stronger than this." Greg roared into the oblivion, swinging the shard in the darkness, praying for a glimpse of anything. But it was as if the shadows were mocking him, tightening their hold each time he fought back. The weight of despair began to crush him, and he felt the fraying tether of his sanity starting to unravel. Suddenly, Emily's voice shattered through the chaos. "If we are stronger together, then let us prove it." She clutched at the shadows, her hands trembling but fierce. Her chant grew louder, words tumbling like stones against the tide of darkness, each syllable a lifeline. The shadows recoiled, a hiss escaping their depths. Greg felt a sudden rush of energy surge through him, as if Emily's voice was a beacon cutting through the suffocating fog. He gripped the shard tighter, drawing strength from her determination. "Jack!" Together they shouted in unison, their voices intertwining with a newfound vigor. Light flickered around them, dimly at first, but gathering strength. Just as the shadows aimed to snuff out their resolve, Greg felt something unexpected, a strange connection to the shards swelling within him. What if it was not just a weapon, but a bridge to uncovering the truth? With every ounce of courage, he thrust the shard deeper into the darkness, digging for something buried, something hidden. "We challenge you," he bellowed. "We are not afraid anymore." The shadows screamed as they splintered violently, the air thick with the echoes of their pain. It sent a shock through the room, rattling the very foundations. Jack's screams turned into a wail of fear as he was pulled deeper into the darkness, farther from them. "Jack!" The word was a raw desperation, searing through Greg's throat. He felt as if his heart was yanked from his chest, but deep within the darkness, something began to shift. From the black, a shape emerged, a figure clothed in shadows, but its eyes it had no eyes. Just empty sockets staring into the void, glistening with predatory hunger. "Do you really think you can defeat me?" The voice was a death knell, cold and cavernous. "I am your nightmares made flesh. I gather the broken pieces of your hearts." "Not today," Emily shouted, grounding herself in the chaos. Her voice had grown fierce, an anchor in the storm of despair. "You don't understand love. You've never felt it, and you'll never take it from us." With a fierce determination, Greg pushed forward, fueled by Emily's spirit. He could almost feel the weight of their unity mingling with the shard, giving it life. But the shadows writhed against him, desperation radiating from their form. "Love is but a shadow," the entity screeched, its form twisting grotesquely. "And when the light goes out, it fades to nothing." The room trembled, walls shaking, as shadows and light collided around them. A crackling tension filled the air. Emily's voice continued to rise, chanting against the darkness, but Greg could feel exhaustion creeping in. Suddenly, a burst of light shot from the shard, illuminating the swirling dark for just a heartbeat. In that flash, Greg saw the outline of Jack, tangled in the shadows, reaching for them. The connection sparked, spreading warmth that fought against the cold tendrils around him. "Jack!" Hold on, he cried, reaching out with everything he had. As the shadows shrieked, Greg felt hope swell, a primal force rising, clawing to break free. But would they find a way through the inevitable collapse of their sanctuary? Or was this battle only the beginning of something far worse? In that electric moment, they stood on the brink, entangled in their choices. The flickering path ahead was veiled with unanswered questions. Who would remain standing in the war of shadows? And when the shards of fear shattered, what would they discover waiting beneath? The darkness enveloped them once more, but this time, a different heartbeat pulsed through the chaos. Clarity emerged, faint but persistent. Could they turn it into something more powerful? Or would they become lost among the whispers of despair forever? As the shadows tightened their grip, Greg felt the cold encroach upon their very essence. Panic spiked through his chest, but alongside it surged a fierce determination. He wasn't going to let this dark presence tear apart the only light he had, his family. With Emily's voice rising defiantly against the void, something in him ignited anew. "Jack, hold on to your mom," he urged, his eyes darting to see the shadows swirling around them, hungry and desperate. The bond between them crackled like a live wire as he realized the true power of their togetherness. "We have to fight this." With all eyes trained on the darkness that threatened to consume them, Greg positioned himself in front, the shard of glass shimmering in his grip. The pulse of fear emanating from Emily and the kids echoed through him, blending with their courage. "We face this together," he shouted, feeling the power of their unity build inside of him. The dark entity paused, taken aback as it sensed the shift. "You fool," it screeched. "Your love is but a flickering candle in the storm." But the light from Greg's shard began to swell, glowing brighter as it connected with the power of their shared resolve. "Together, as a family," Greg yelled, forcing the shard forward. The air shimmered as if time itself held its breath. A blinding wave of warmth burst forth, chasing the darkness. The shadows writhed, a cacophony of despair spiraling into chaos. "No!" the entity shrieked, its voice fraying at the edges. It sensed the tide turning. "Emily now?" Greg shouted. He watched as she seized Jack's hand, their fingers intertwining a tether of light, holding them firm against disintegrating shadows. "Lily!" Emily cried, and in that instant, they felt her presence surge beside them. The light multiplied, cascading through the room as if it were a precious thread stringing them all together, unbreakable and strong. Greg steeled himself, pushing deeper, gripping the glass shard, and summoning every ounce of love he had for his family. "This ends now." The room brightened, the light intensifying to a white-hot brilliance that sent shockwaves through the darkness, splintering it apart as if it were flaming paper. The next moment was a blur, a frantic whirl of shadows tumbling backward, howling in defeat. Greg risked a glance at Emily, who was fighting an overwhelming tide of fear with a determined look on her face. Jack clung desperately to her, eyes wide with wonder and terror. "Don't let go," she urged, and Lily's innocent laughter filled the air, echoing against the now retreating darkness. With one final push, Greg hurled the shard into the heart of the darkness. The glass exploded into shards of white light, illuminating the room like a supernova. The oppressive weight lifted, replaced by a sudden rush of fresh air and warmth. The voices of despair faded to whispers, muffled cries dissolving into nothingness, leaving nothing but a soft, golden glow in its place. As the last vestiges of the sinister power evaporated, they stood in the attic, breathless. Every heartbeat resonated with the sheer weight of their relief, their survival. The shadows were gone, as was the dread that had suffocated their home for far too long. Yet, everything felt different. A tangible lightness settled in the air, brushing against their skin like the first breath of spring after a long, brutal winter. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, they were together and unharmed. Greg wrapped his arms around Emily and the kids, holding them tightly. "We did it. We're free," he whispered, the overwhelming joy warring against the lingering shadows in the back of his mind. Their laughter, once twisted by fear, rang through the house. Home. This was what it felt like. But deep down, Greg knew this moment wouldn't erase the lingering fear. They had faced darkness and emerged alive, but at a cost that would always cling to them, an invisible thread binding them to what they had faced. As dawn broke outside, stretching bright fingers of light across their world, he felt a swell of hope. They had stared into the abyss and returned stronger than before. With each day, they could choose to add light to their lives and evict the shadows that threatened to return. Together, he said softly, locking eyes with Emily, who nodded firmly, a radiant smile crossing her face. Together, they turned towards the stairs, a new adventure awaiting in the brilliant light of a brand new day, a day full of possibilities. They stepped out of the attic, hand in hand, ready to face whatever might come next, and in that moment, it hit them. The darkness might return, shadows might try to creep back in, but as long as they stood united, as a family, there was nothing they couldn't face. Remember, family is strength. As the last of the shadows faded against the first rays of sunlight, echoed a voice in their hearts. They had claimed their future together. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm and help us grow. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. What did you think? Instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support, and don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.